All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Talk Tuesday, November 12th. We hope all is well. We're going to get going today because we do have a lot of content and a lot to share with you and learn along with you. So just to introduce in today's agenda, hi, everyone. I'm Christine Killowind. I'm a consultant at CERC. I am here with my colleagues, Anne-Marie Cordisco and Holly Ryan. We are also here with our CSTE partners and colleagues, Kari Sullivan Custer and Jay Brown. Today we have really a great topic and content piece on shifting mindsets around attendance and engagement. We are here with Caroline Calhoun from EdAdvance and Gemma Joseph Lumpkin from the New Haven Public Schools. Towards the end, I'll just wrap up in a minute just with any upcoming attendance and engagement meetings, but we will get going. So Superintendent's Digest, just some quick things from November 4th and November 8th. Some information might be of interest to you. We always put the QR code and the link in. So if you would like to dive into any of these resources, please feel free to do that. Also, if you have trouble with the QR code or the link, you could also go just to CSTE Superintendent's Digest, and this comes right up as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Kari Sullivan Custer.
Before you do that, is Joe Hawk on? I think she wanted to talk about the mentoring. Is she here?
I put those after Kari, your slide.
After me? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, if that works, just to give a little more time in case she has to join.
Okay, perfect. So before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to say hello everyone. Happy November, and I hope everyone had a lovely weekend. I don't know that everybody had a long weekend, but some of us did. There's been a lot of discussion around school and district attendance teams at the state level and making sure folks know that they are, that they're operating, that they are a #1 practice for improving attendance. We haven't published September data because we don't publish September data. We wait till October, but the numbers for September for average daily attendance is about the same as it was last September. And so it doesn't look like it's going to be, September was a great attendance month, but we know that we had a lot going on, right? We had a lot of school threats and things like that happening, keeping kids from coming to school. So I'm going to talk a little bit about attendance. So put your attendance team hats on and think about your school attendance team, if you're on a school attendance team, or your district attendance team. And I'm gonna make this a little more interactive today. I see Kenneth Joseph there. So Kenneth is on our advisory team and has made some suggestions that we really learn more from each other as we are in these sessions. So we're going to do this through the chat, but if you'd like to share out, please feel free to go ahead and unmute and do that. So the next slide, please. So I'm interested here. Do you participate on your district or school attendance team? And if you do, just put it in the chat. And say, if you could say district or school or both would be great. Because district attendance teams should be made up of a diverse group of stakeholders, from your school nurse to should be managed by a school administrator or a district administrator. We should have student support on there, special education, if you really think about the root causes for attendance. So I see a lot of people are on their school or district attendance team. That's excellent. And promote Talk Tuesday to your team members. We're open to anyone. We're not selective. Anyone who's working in the area of attendance is welcome to join. So Christine, if you could go to the next slide, please. So how often do you meet your school attendance team? Do you meet once a month, once every other month? Do you meet I've heard we meet every couple of days. I literally have heard that from districts. We get together every couple of days, look at how we're doing, or is it a weekly meeting? The legislation for school and district attendance teams to just meet basically every month is what the legislation says. All right. Next question, please. So go to the next slide, Christina. If you could share, what topics are you discussing in your team meetings? What are some of the top things? Are you talking about, are you looking at your data? Are you looking at specific students? Are you looking at a multi-tiered system? Have you, and I'm just going to get some suggestions. I had a whole list here and then I thought, no, I'll just let them, yes, tell us what you're looking at. Are you really focusing on tier 3 students, or are you focusing on those universal tier 1 support and strategies so that we keep kids from becoming tier 2 and tier 3? I see lots of great trends, root causes, strategy, overall attendance data. Thank you, Mark. Targeting those who are, okay, they're coming in so fast. Celebrating students who are attending. Elaine, I love that. Like, let's focus on the positive. When we're meeting with parents, say for home visits or just having meetings, like, what are the family assets? What are their strengths? So that we're not just focusing on what are their weaknesses and what do we need to fix? Like, what can we build on with families? These are excellent. And I think I have one or two more. Incentives, yes. Thank you, Amani. Did you find something in particular that really made a difference, either this fall or last year, that your attendance team did and you thought, well, wow, that really worked? Let's continue to do that, or let's share that with other districts. Good morning, Gemma. Nice to see you. Yes. So what works? What can we share with others that you found helped in either your district or your school attendance team? I'm not seeing as much what works. Just starting to meet, so still work in progress. But you know what? Just talking about it gets people motivated and thinking about it. Getting that messaging out there that at our school district or in our school, you know, school is better with you. We want everyone here every day, and missing just 1 or 2 days is too much. Look at all of this, meeting with families, making calls during the meetings, like actually just say, let's pick up and make a call right now to whoever, a family or friend, or how do you balance those who are not fully vaccinated and returning attending to school? That is a great question. And so I will put that on the questions for the next Talk Tuesday. I'll bring that questions from the field next Talk Tuesday, because we have been working on that. There's state statute and there's policy, and there's not necessarily agreement with the two. And so new state guidance should be coming out about students who are new to the district shouldn't be registered until they are actually have received their immunizations and their physicals. But students who are already registered who don't have their immunizations or physicals should not start school and should be marked absent. Perfect attendance award, improved attendance rewards, great. And one more question for the field. Would you be willing to share the successes and challenges of your district or school attendance team? So we're always looking for districts to come on and be a bright spot, like today with New Haven. We're going to hear about a lot of their work. So if you're interested in participating on Talk Tuesday or just meeting with our team to hear what you're doing, so that we can share it with others, please put it in the chat and we'll follow up with you so that we can share what's happening in the districts. That works. Is there anything anyone would like to share with the group before we move on to some information slides? I thank you all. Yes, I've been on EdSite Secure, Mark Weaver, and the attendance data on there right now is for last year. Yes, because we don't release the new data until the October data is finalized, which should be in the next 2 weeks probably. So, and you'll get October data in November. Because for September data, it's just not as reliable because it's only 2 days. A student misses 2 days a month and they're chronically absent. So it's not really as reliable. Average daily attendance is on EdSite Public and EdSite Secure. And so we were 94.3 last September, average daily attendance, and we're 94.4 this September. So we're basically the same as we were last September. And I do know that we were 90 in the low, not 93 percentage points for average daily attendance last May. So the monthly attendance report, chronic absence report, goes to from October to May. Okay, next slide, please. Here it is. I didn't want to start with the statute, right? When we write letters to parents, we say don't start with the legal language, right? Let's talk a little bit about why it's important for kids to come to school. But the way that the statute was written, 10-198C, was Public Act 15-2025, which is 2015. This law has been on the books. This is not in response to the pandemic. This is in response to 10% was too high chronic absent, and we were desperate to get it below 10%, down to 6%. So if you are a district and you have a chronic absence rate of 10% or higher, if you're a district, 10%, you have to have a district attendance team according to the law. If you are, if you have a school with a 15% chronic absence rate, you have to establish an attendance review team for the school district or the team, for that school. So it gets a little confusing here. So I basically say if your district has over 10% or you have a school with 15% or more, you have to have attendance teams in that school or at your district. But if you're a school with under 10% chronic absence, but you have one school with a 15% chronic absence, you have to either have a district team or a team at that school. And so I did an analysis of chronic absence rates for all districts last year. For the data was from last year. I did this the end of last week. And there are about 62 districts that do not have to have an district attendance team. Can you go to the next slide, please? Here they are. These are the 62 districts that have a chronic absence rate less than 10%. You can see they're very small districts. So if you're on this call, it's very likely that your district is required to have a district attendance team that meets once a month. Now, there may be more districts that are required to have a district attendance team if they're below 10% and they have one school or more with a 15% chronic absence rate. Then they have to have a district team or a team at that school. But let's celebrate these 62 districts because that's awesome. These districts are all under 10%, and so we're going to see that list grow this year, right? Because we're going to I'll do a better job getting our kids coming back to school. Any questions about this? Okay. Hi, Erica. Thank you. So go to the next slide, please. And I should answer this. So this is it's called the Reducing Chronic Absence in Connecticut Schools, a Prevention and Intervention Guide. And it was drafted in 2017 as a result of that legislation. The legislation also required Connecticut to have a prevention intervention guide. And I'll tell you that this guide still is very relevant. And over on the side here, you can see the chapters about what is chronic absence? Why are students chronically absent? Why is it an important issue? And then we get into what can a district do and what can schools do to improve attendance? And there's a lot of really good information in there. So I put the QR code and I put the link here to the Prevention Intervention Guide. There's also lots of information at Attendance Works, including the attendance team assessment tools, which are a great tool for teams to look at once or twice a year to see how they're doing, and if it really informs the team about what they should be doing and gives them ideas so that they can improve their practice with their attendance teams. I think that might be my last slide. Let me see. One more. Yep. Any questions for me before I go off? I saw questions in the chat, and so Unless anybody wants to talk, which you're welcome to, I'll go into the chat and I'll try and respond to your questions or follow up after today's talk Tuesday. But please remember that most of our school districts are required to have district attendance teams, and most of our schools are over 15% chronic absence. So there should be lots of team meetings. I don't think we're seeing the improvements in chronic absence this fall that we had hoped to see. And so if you're not having district and school attendance team meetings, I really encourage you to do this. It makes a big difference. Okay. I think I don't see any questions. We'll be able to keep the information on this. Yes, the slides are posted on the Talk Tuesday webpage and they're emailed out after the meeting within a couple days. So you will have these slides. If there's any link that you want me to put in the chat, just mention it in the chat and I'll drop it in as we go through our presentations. And I'm going to turn it over to Jill Hawk. Jill Hawk with Governor's Prevention Partnership. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about a mentoring opportunity.
Well, thank you and good morning, everyone. I spoke to you a couple weeks ago about an initiative that we have with the State Department of Education to really look at school-based mentoring across the state. And that includes looking at districts that do and don't have mentoring available in their schools. Part of what I am doing as the researcher, I'm doing some interviews with school administrators about their schools. If we reach out to you, please respond to us so that we can get your one-on-one feedback during those interviews. But we're also doing a survey of school superintendents. We've sent it out through MailChimp a couple times. I've sent some individual emails out to people. As of this morning, we have about 26% of the school districts sending in their survey. So if you haven't done so, please do. Like I said, it's important to get feedback from all of the school districts, not just the ones that have mentoring programs and not just the ones who are interested in starting mentoring programs either. We need all of your voices to really have a good understanding of what the field is like. If you could go to the next slide. This is the QR code to the survey. Like I said, our goal is to get 100% of the districts completing the survey by the 27th. We will be sending out MailChimp and personal emails. We'll also drop off some letters to some school districts if we're able to. And we've got staff calling. So please, as soon as you finish the survey, we'll stop coming after you, asking you to complete the survey. But it's really important to get your voice heard. So if you could please respond by the QR code or through one of our emails, check your spam folders just in case that's where they're going. But it's very important. And thank you for those of you who have so quickly and diligently filled out the surveys so far. So thank you very much, Kari. And this is the information about the interviews. The interviews are half an hour that I do with you. Aristide Hill is the director, the associate director in charge of the project, and he can help with the coordination of those interviews.
Thank you, Joe, so much. Appreciate this. And we will, of course, send out the slide deck too with all this information. So just in case you didn't capture it right now in the moment. And I'm going to turn it over to our facilitators for today, Caroline Calhoun and Gemma Lumpkin. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Christine. Good morning, everybody. My name is Caroline Calhoun, and I am a professional learning and attendance specialist here at EdAdvance, the Northwest Regional Education Support Center, Service Center. I also co-coordinate the LEAP program, Connecticut's Relational Home Visit Program, and I would love to turn it over to Gemma to introduce herself. Good morning, Gemma.
Good morning.
I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our Talk Tuesday group.
Okay, I stepped away. I was like, thank you. And it was nice seeing Jill Hawk. I hope she got the New Haven survey. We submitted ours, so we can be right in there with that 26% that have said, describe what our mentoring needs are. Just wanted to acknowledge that. Good morning, everybody who are on this call. You see my name there, my title, Chief of Youth, Family, and Community Engagement for New Haven Public Schools. And the one thing I just want to say to all of you, I was just reading the chat, this is hard work. We are all struggling to figure out how to crack the code on chronic absenteeism. And I'm right there with you in terms of we have these joyful moments and then we're in these deep, dark moments, depending on the school, depending on the day. But what we know is that we could make progress. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. And I just wanted to just take the moment and acknowledge the difficulty that this is, not just here in Connecticut, around the country, around the world. Caroline and I had the opportunity to see now. And just to shout out to all of you, just for being here and being on the front lines, being in the ring, doing that hard work. We're going to pull through this together.
Thank you, Gemma. I love the positivity and the optimism, and the pep talk for everybody this morning. Gemma just referenced that we had the opportunity to present together actually on an international stage. Last week, we were in New Orleans presenting at the International Network of School Attendance, and we talked about very similar topics of what we are going to share with you all today, essentially about the structures and systems when it comes to attendance and engagement, but also really thinking about the mindset shift of how that really seems to be the secret ingredient when we think about all things attendance and engagement. So we had folks in the room from Japan, Australia, Holland, really all over the world. It was an incredible audience, and to learn that folks are tackling this problem, what was termed as a wicked problem by researcher Joshua Childs, who was one of the keynote presenters, and thinking about and learning from our colleagues from that global perspective was really fascinating. And just feeling like, as Gemma mentioned, this struggle is not unique to Connecticut, nor even to the United States, but is really something happening around the world. So that was very, very informative for us. And everyone really is looking to Connecticut as leaders in this work, which became abundantly clear as we talked to folks from other states, and particularly when they think about this mindset work. So we're excited to share what we've been working on with you today. And Christine, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you so much. So as you all know, Connecticut as a leader in this work really is very well positioned because of the policy levers and the structures and the systems that have been in place for decades. So when we think about these different initiatives, such as Talk Tuesdays, such as our attendance awareness campaign, our LEAP program, thinking about EdSite and the dashboards, also thinking about the student attendance advisory team, the groundbreaking research through CSERC, all of these pieces really help the state be in a position to lead this work. As you probably know, New Haven is one of our LEAP districts. So Gemma and I have been partnering not only as LEAP districts, but doing broader attendance and engagement work with her team for about 18 months. And we just wanted to share with you all today some of the work that we've been doing along this journey as we are working to strengthen and enhance the great work that's already been happening in New Haven Public Schools. So next slide, please, and I'll pass it to Gemma to talk about her sort of take on the multi-tiered system of supports.
Thank you, Caroline. And Kari actually alluded to this work earlier, talking about where are we, where are our efforts? I always say this is the hill, the house that I'm gonna die on, because we've got to live on the first floor of the house, even in the foundations. The foundational pieces, that dark blue component, those are the areas that we have control of. So that when we talk around what strategies are we using, look, we all love the LEAP component of tier 2, but none of that stuff is gonna work if we are not supporting the essentials. positive relationships, healthy learning environments, challenging, engaging curriculum. I saw someone on the in the chat said kindergarten families don't believe or don't know that children are actually learning in school. And that is well documented in the research, not just here or in a particular school or in a particular region. And what that informed me is that's part of our foundational supports. We have to do more to engage our families around what is happening in kindergarten. What are the learnings? What specifically is happening? We put out a calendar earlier this year explaining to families that kindergarten, first, second, third grade, the learning that happens here or does not happen here will have a repercussion on our students. And so the hard work of making sure that the advisories are happening, that the schools are welcoming and safe. We're talking about, do kids feel safe? Do they feel, and I'm not talking about, the big stuff. I'm talking about the little things of things that happens in the hallway, kids feeling bullied. And I said this the other day to the team. Many of us in K-8, we're dealing with the alpha generation, the kids who, 2014 to now, they're 0 to like 14 years old. They have a whole different language. So that one school learned that children were feeling bullied in this school. This is an awesome school, and they were so surprised. And one of the things that we communicated is that these kids are using a different language. They use words like, what did I hear? A bikini, and that means something, all right? They use language that we don't know that children are feeling bullied and uncomfortable, and because we don't know their language. And so that is something that we in this world has to tune into a little bit more around welcoming and safe school climate. Are we tuned in to the alpha generation, especially in K-8? And then there are further issues up in 9th and 12th grade, but we have to respond to that. The welcoming schools, does the security guard say hello? Does the secretary look up with, when someone comes to that front door? Do you see yourself in the school? So we are rolling out the correct CSDE Welcoming Schools initiative that we participated in a few years ago, pre-COVID. We've taken that work, we're refining it based on the current literature, and it's etched right into our strategic operating plan that all of our schools are going to be trained in welcoming schools. We control those. We control traditions and celebrations. We control challenging and engaging. So we've just got to be careful not to live in the attic of this multi-tiered systems of support, and to hone in on the foundations.
Thank you, Gemma. Next slide, please. So when Kari and Gemma and I brainstorm, and when we think about all of these different pieces that really need to be in place for a district as you are tackling the complex, wicked problem of chronic absenteeism, we think about these key ingredients to this comprehensive all hands on deck approach. And two of the most important things that you heard Kari mentioning earlier are the district-wide attendance teams and the school attendance teams, making sure that those teams are functioning with fidelity and are really thinking through that big picture lens, thinking about all of these different intersecting, interrelated pieces when it comes to attendance is absolutely crucial for districts to make inroads and move the needle when it comes to chronic absenteeism. Gemma and I have really been working on sort of a reset district-wide as we look at how to make improvements and really move the needle with their data. And part of that work has been thinking about who do we want to have around the table at a district attendance team meeting. So it's really heartening to see in the chat so many of these districts that are meeting routinely, regularly for their district attendance team meetings. But thinking about what is the power of a very intentional agenda to move forward and make progress through that district lens, and also through that school attendance team lens, making sure there's oversight, making sure that the right people are at the table, that you're not missing important perspectives, making sure the special education lens is represented, for example, the school nurse, etc. So when Kari and I were crafting this list of sort of the key ingredients, we, none of this is novel or new. This is the good work that's been happening across the state for years. But really what we kept coming back to was that in addition to these key ingredients you see on the screen is really that mindset shift when it comes to all things attendance and engagement. So as Gemma and I started working with New Haven and with her team, it was really about, okay, dialing in, honing in, zeroing in on strengthening these key ingredients, but also really making sure that we are tackling that mindset shift when it comes to this work. So if you don't mind switching to the next slide, Gemma is going to just walk you through a little thinking exercise about mindsets and shifting mindsets.
All right. So why don't we just throw into the chat, what do you think a mindset is? What is a mindset? Just throw in your thoughts about that. And then also throw into the chat, what is a mindset shift? So you have a mindset, and then there is a mindset shift. Some folks can call it out. I see unmute, you can call it out, or you can add to the chat. So I see Deidre, thank you so much for getting us started. Your mindset is your thoughts. Thank you, Kenneth. I'm gonna open up the chat. Rachel, lens through which you are seeing things.
I love that, Ruth. You can change it or improve it.
Neuroplasticity.
Your focus on your principles, attitudes, perspective.
I see Kenneth added in looking at data, looking at proactive ways. And I'm having a hard time scrolling. So if you can go ahead, Caroline, and call out any of the
Sure.
that you might see. Thank you.
Folks, there's common threads through here about perspectives, one's perception of the world, your value system, mindset shift, how to reframe negative thoughts to perhaps more helpful ones, what your attitudes are, your belief systems. Everybody is definitely on track here. And this really is so key. If we go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about the research. I love that somebody added your North Star. So when we think about mindsets, really these are these deep assumed patterns of thinking. So they really shape how we make sense of the world and also therefore what we do, our actions, our behaviors. And we acquire these mindsets through every different influence you can imagine, right? So it's through your networks of family and friends, it's through news, entertainment media, all of these different pieces. But they really matter because they shape our behavior and our decisions. So we've referenced here the Frameworks Institute, which is a think tank that really helps mission-driven organizations communicate about social issues in ways that build public will to support change. And so they created and published this strategic report called Mindset Shifts. What are they? Why do they matter? How do they happen? So if you are so inclined to dig into the research, that is linked there for you. But the reality is that these mindset shifts can take many, many years. And that is part of why chronic absenteeism is such a complex problem when we think about shifting folks' mindsets around attendance and engagement work. So I'm going to pass it back to Gemma for this next slide as she talks about sort of where New Haven is in this journey of shifting mindsets.
So you see right here, the old truancy punitive mindset, working on a family. That's a real critical language right there, right? Compared to working with a family. And so, for example, and my heart really goes out to the person who says, look, our parents are not on the same page about the importance of school attendance. And this is where those home visiting and those relationships become so important. Quick story. So we go meet with this family where some days the student's there, some days the student's not there. We call mom, maybe she picks up the phone, maybe not. And we are trying to emphasize the importance of attendance. Once we were able to get into the home and have this relational home visit, what we learned is that mom is working 3 jobs. She comes in at 4 o'clock. She then leaves at, shortly thereafter. The older child is responsible for the younger kids, and the older child has to be at school at 7 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes he makes it in terms of getting the kids ready and getting to the bus on time. And sometimes he doesn't get it done. And the kids end up staying home, right? They're like 8, 9, 10 years old. The reality is that parent, when we talk to them, and we're shifting into this idea of hopes and dreams and aspirations, parents want their children to be successful. They tell us that when we ask them, what are your aspirations? Their challenge is, what are the resources that's available to help them to achieve that? And we try to get into that work as well. But the critical piece of the mindset shift is to be able to say to that family, we get you, we see you, we know you're working 2 or 3 jobs. Nobody's sitting home just doing nothing. So we want to figure out how we can support you through the resources that already exist. Maybe there's some community supports we can bring to the table. Maybe some things we just have not thought about. But it's really important that our mindset begins to shift to be supportive of our families, to recognize so much the wealth of affirmation that's within that family, how they lean on each other for support, how some of them feel very lonely. I'm a single mother, and so I know how lonely that journey could be. Get my kids out in the morning is a movie in the house, right? It's not even a movie, it's a comedy show for some people. It is so hard to get my 2 children going at times. So the mindset shift has got to be, and Ed Advance was so helpful in getting our teams to move away from these parents, they are not on the same page with us, they don't quite get it, to really building that sense of empathy around what is really happening with the families and how can we be supportive in getting them to build upon what they have, expand what's available to them, work with them to support them, and actually see them as vital and important to our success and to our students' success.
Thank you, Gemma. Next slide, please, Christine. Kari is our data guru, as we know, at the state, and I am much more of a humanities person. So when I think about attendance and engagement, she's taught me a lot about data, I will say, and so has Gemma. But when I think about all of this attendance and engagement work, I really think of it as this sort of beyond the statistics and data, how all of this work is more often than not at the heart of what all other school leadership big picture thinking and initiatives is all about. So we can think of attendance and engagement as the umbrella under which so many intertwined priorities fall. Next slide, please. And as we think about this work, really viewing it as the intersection of everything we do. So we can't dig into attendance and engagement without thinking about the root causes of absenteeism and disengagement. And a lot of this work really comes down to that mindset shift, thinking about how we can enhance a sense of belonging for students, thinking about the climate and culture in our buildings and as a district, thinking about our curriculum. And as Gemma mentioned, if students feel like they are seen and heard and valued, if they feel represented within the building, all of these pieces come into play. Next slide, please. So just to give you some data, Gemma is going to talk a little bit about some nuts and bolts of numbers when it comes to New Haven, and I will turn it back to you.
Right. So you can see here, and I think we may have pulled this right off of Ed's site, the numbers that started in 2019, 2020, we were at 21.1%, and we were just completely upset about that. And then after COVID, you saw the rise, and then another rise, and then a fall, and then we flattened out at 37.5. I'm happy to say today we're at October 31st, which is what we reported. We were at 24.9 starting this month. Thank you for the applause, Kari. But what we know from this data is the importance of tracking, knowing where you are on a constant basis. And a big lesson this year, we put out very early the average daily attendance. And I think that number got our principals, we send it out to our principals, assistant principals, social workers, counselors, what that data is. And that really supported our efforts in focusing. So here you're looking at our chronic absenteeism ending last year. We're at 24.9 this year. We know the hard work that it's going to take to get us to where we want to be, which is many points below this number. But we're hopeful that we were able to push the number down to 24.9%. And leave home visits. You know, you've heard me say this. I will testify to this to the end. Connecting with families in this relational way is one of the most powerful sets of strategies that we can put into place. New Haven, we actually document our home visits in something that we call field notes. And we've just completed a study where we added aspirations and strengths of the families. So we're learning more than just the needs and the barriers. And we know that when we do this well, families connect with us better. When we go in from this perspective of understanding and supportive, it makes a difference. So the data is there, always in front of us, but that qualitative set of data that we're going to start adding to these slides as we go forward when we're learning about families is 100 times more powerful than these numbers.
Thank you, Gemma. Next slide, please. This is a photo of Gemma's department, and we've had the pleasure of working with them for about a year at this point. And really how this came to be was that we wanted to strengthen what was already working in New Haven Public Schools and with Gemma's staff, but we wanted to give more training as we continued to dig into doing home visits. And really, Gemma did a huge amount of work researching, analyzing all of the field notes when home visitors were logging LEAP home visits. And again, if you're not a LEAP district, that doesn't matter at all. Lots of districts are doing home visits and using the LEAP philosophy. They've been trained in the LEAP 101 home visitor training with my colleague Francisco Baides at CREC. And essentially, the home visitor field notes gave us insight into the fact that even though we were really advocating for this strengths-based approach, folks often sort of go back to what they know. So it would be chatting with a family, offering resources, thinking about barriers, all of which is necessary, but maybe not what we want to come first. We want that asset-based, strengths-based lens to be taking the lead in these conversations. And so we really dug in. And if we go to the next slide, please, we kept saying, okay, we're starting here. We're working on shifting away from that truancy punitive mindset. But the more that Gemma and I kept digging into this about what does that actually mean in practice, what does this look like? What we ended up developing was a graphic you'll see on the next slide, please, Christine, that really captures this shifting mindset work. So we have to think about when we are shifting mindsets, it's not just this idea of moving from punitive to supportive, which is sort of the piece that most people think about when we talk about shifting mindsets, but it's also about moving from being culturally destructive or blind to what we call culturally proficient and humble. You saw that we noted some of this work comes from education consultant Kathy Taylor, who is an amazing resource. She did a lot of work with Naugatuck Public Schools. She did a lot of work with the entire EdAdvance agency, and she really helped us frame our thinking when it comes to this work. It's also about being culturally responsive. Are we moving away from that culturally dismissive attitude where we are unaware to being culturally responsive to our families? Are we moving from inequity to equity, thinking about equitable policies and procedures when it comes to attendance? Are we moving from being sympathetic to actually being empathetic, thinking about what it's like to walk in the shoes of these students, these families, even colleagues? And then, as Gemma has really focused on, moving from that deficit-based lens to strengths-based. So all of this work, this essentially, we created a curriculum that took us about a year to do a series of sessions with Gemma's department, but also with building leaders across the district. So we had lots of hands-on activities, lots of reflection opportunities to really sort of dig into all of these different elements of a mindset shift. Next slide, please. So today we're going to give you kind of a glimpse into some of the content that we used that you can use for your own personal reflection and really in the areas of being culturally humble and responsive. So this means that we dig into what culture is. We need to think about our own identity. We need to examine bias. But before we dive into that, we want to really think about students as our North Star. So Gemma is going to share just a little bit of information about these two students in New Haven.
So what we like to do is to present things from the student lens, and then there is another story. There is the adult lens. So here is Nathaniel. This student is in kindergarten, and by the way, most kindergarten kids love being in school. They love the whole social and playing element of it. But he said he's only been in school for 3 days. This is after about 3 weeks of school. My mom says she will bring me. She also has a hard time with half days. I'm not sure why we continue to miss school. Please help. That was the kindergarten student perspective. And then we get to high school. And Christina here is a 10th grader, and she's really not connected to school. She has friends, and some of the teachers are nice, but when I go to school, she gets good grades, understands the work, but I'm just not motivated to be there. So here's what we see in the data on each of these cases. Here in kindergarten, you have a child who wants to be there and mom is struggling, right? And then you have Christina, who is coming to school, but here's what happens to students like Christina. We see these are the students who end up on the cusp, right? They're doing well. They are coming to school every day. They're probably making straight A's, but they're still missing out. And by the time we get to the end of the school year, these students have ended up missing 20 days, 21, 22 days. And it becomes an issue of why? Why is this happening? I want to throw in a little bit of the adult lens, and that's not on the slide. So here is a mom who is going back to school while her student is chronically absent, by the way. And as we leaned in on this shifting mindset, mom, and we do a home visit based on our training, mom is saying she's proud of her ability to navigate school and home and having the drive to go back to school while she is raising her kids alone. And she is hoping to provide her kids with a better life. Now she has a goal to get the students to school for a week, for one full week, to get the students to school every day. Because of everything that's going on, mom is missing school. And if we had just gone in and dealt with the family just on why isn't your kid coming, we would never have learned that there's a mom here who sees the struggle, who through her own struggles is trying to go back to school, who sees herself as doing the right thing to improve her children. But with all of this, her young child is still missing school in a way that they should not. And so we wanted to raise these stories, these lenses, to support our efforts in moving our mindsets, making that mind shift away from what we think to what is actual reality for our families.
Thank you, Gemma. Next slide, please, Christine. So in that same vein, this is really about zeroing in on what the real story is with the family versus what might be our own personal bias or deficit thinking. So while we engage with a student or family, we want to check for bias. We need to ask ourselves, is our implicit bias perhaps leading us to make assumptions and think through a deficit lens? We also need to be aware of our emotional reactions that can be judgmental. We need to evaluate ourselves and stop and make sure that this isn't playing into how we are interacting with a family. Next slide, please. As we mentioned, really a big part of this mindset shifting is about becoming culturally humble and culturally responsive, which requires analyzing our own culture, our identity, our perspective, our lens. So when you think about this question, how would you define culture? Go ahead and just unmute or add to the chat. How would you define culture? All right, group norms, expectations, the way of life, sets of traditions that a group of people engage in on a daily basis. I used to teach humanities for sixth graders, so we used to always, think about all these different elements and aspects of culture, attitudes. Let's go to the next slide, Christine. Thank you, everybody, for contributing. So our list might look something like this, and I think we hit on a lot of these even just in that short time. So I'm not going to read this to you, you can see it on here, but essentially all of these different components of culture, when we think about customs, language, material artifacts, what's passed down from one generation to the next. One thing to really think about here is that this is often unconscious. We are often unaware of how our own behaviors and attitudes might have been shaped by our own culture. And when we think about the diverse populations in our schools across Connecticut and the families that we're working with, this becomes really critical as we work to be empathetic and adopt a culturally responsive mindset. Next slide, please. One piece that is really useful to think about is what we call the iceberg concept of culture. So when we think about an iceberg, you have some parts of culture or part of the iceberg that we call the surface culture. This is what's above sea level, so to speak. This is what is obviously visible when it comes to culture. But then we have deep culture, and this is where you get things like unconscious rules, things that are completely below sea level, so to speak. So the emotional load for that below sea level deep culture is really intense. So this is where there are lots of examples of unspoken or unconscious rules in a culture. So I'm curious just to hear, what are some examples that you can think of that are unspoken or unconscious rules in your own culture? And go ahead and unmute or add that to the chat. Thank you, Angelo. Mutual respect. Hard work. Thank you, Corey. Other thoughts? Strong work ethic. Thank you, Rose. Success. That's such an interesting one, Bobby. Looking at others' perspectives. Staying healthy. I'm going to take that example of success, which is such an interesting one because depending on one's culture, success looks different, right? So all of these different unconscious rules and unspoken rules really vary from culture to culture. And this is something we need to be mindful of as we do this work. Thank you all for your contributions. Next slide, please, Christine. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Gemma.
Okay, so I see my friend Kathy Taylor's messaging here about unconscious, instinctive, negative judgment about others or implicit bias. And I think that what we have seen as we communicate with families is really what has raised those sort of unconsciousness, right? Like, why can't they get it together? the instinctive negative judgment, like they're not working hard enough, or I did this, I did that. I share with folks that, as I identify as a Black American woman. I was born in Trinidad and Tobago. My grandmother is from Barbados. My grandfather is from St. Vincent. We grew up in a small village together as an extended family. That was Palmyra Village. That was 3.5 miles away from our school that we were enrolled, and in San Fernando. And we had to get to school however we could. There were no school buses there. And the attitude was, walk, oh, you're 8 or 9 years old? Walk to school. You, your sister, and your brother, you get to school, right? That was the culture that I was raised in. I have to be super conscious that I don't bring that to say, walk to school, get to school, do whatever you can, just get there. We have to consistently think about how we bring our unconsciousness, how we bring our judgments, how we bring our own experiences, and say, just because I have this experience and just because I was raised a certain way, I am going to impose that on you. I'm going to impose my culture, my bias, my experience on the way you should be. And so this whole idea of really thinking about what's unconscious, what may be instinctively negative judgment about others is super important. And it is something that I have found that I have to consistently think about and make sure you check that we're checking ourselves, that we are not overlaying our own unconscious and instinctive judgments on others, and especially our families.
Thank you, Gemma. Next slide, please, Christine. So this work is pretty heavy. This is not something that is sort of a light lift or something that is done easily or quickly. The remaining slides we have in the deck, which we will be sending out via email, they will also be posted on the Talk Tuesday website, have additional resources, including this slide, really to do some deep thinking about the culture of white supremacy that we all live in here in the United States. Also on the next slide, you'll see a graphic from Kathy Taylor about cultural competence and this cultural proficiency continuum. Next slide, please. This sort of staircase, thinking about where are you on this journey of becoming culturally humble or culturally proficient, thinking about where you are as an individual, thinking about where you are as a school and as a school district. All of this is here for you for personal reflection. It's also available to you to think about any sort of activities you want to do with your own staff. If we can skip to the identity and bias slide, please, that would be great. Thank you. So part of this work, and this is where we'll end, is really in examining ourselves. So we have to examine how we're showing up to this work with students and families, the attitudes that we have, how that's influencing our perspectives, the biases that might form, and therefore unknown blind spots in our thinking. So in other words, we have to know our own story. Gemma just shared a little bit, a slice of her own lens, her own perspective. If we go to the next slide, my perspective, my lens is very different. It's one of white privilege. So I need to recognize that. I need to name it. I need to see my own cultural context very clearly to be on the alert for implicit bias. Shout out to our colleague Amanda Pickett from CSDE, who is on this call and does a tremendous job with this work, working with districts for this sort of reflection. But I need to know I'll make mistakes. I'm not perfect. I can't fall into that trap of white perfectionism, and I need to be open-minded. So we really encourage you to reflect, next slide please, on what is your story? What's your lens, your perspective, your cultural context as you think about this work that you are doing? So all of this is here for you. The final thing I will leave you with is our results matter slide. If we could go to that, and I will pass it to Gemma as we wrap. One more, please, Christine. There we go.
This slide, 23, 24, I mentioned that we are several points down. Even though last year we saw a slight increase in our data, we really wanted to make sure that the work that we were doing was having impact. And you can see here, these are decreases. So you saw Bishop Woods made an 8.4% decrease in chronic absenteeism from the previous year. And going down the slide, Nathan Hale, 8.0. Several of these schools that have made decreases are Title I schools. These are schools where families are really struggling socioeconomically. But with the work and the effort, especially that going back to that tier one, we see the impact of pulling it all together, ensuring that our schools are welcoming, ensuring that we are understanding of the diversity within our schools, ensuring that we are building in the strategies where students feel that they are welcomed. Oh, by the way, one of these schools are the schools that my children attend, 3.9, probably one of a highly diverse school community. That's Jepson School. I know how these schools throw in on ensuring that they are looking at the big picture of tier one, along with addressing the needs of families who are struggling in tier two and tier three as well. So very proud of these results with more to come.
Thank you, Gemma. So essentially what we want you to recognize is when this mindset shift is a focus and you really work diligently to get that thinking ingrained in your staff and have that trickle down into practitioners in the classroom, it can have really positive effects on chronic absenteeism. So thank you very much, Gemma, for being here with us today. We really appreciate the great work happening in your district and with all of your staff. Gemma and I think, are happy to linger as needed. Our contact information is here if anyone wants to reach out with questions, and Christine will be sharing all of this information with you all. I'll pass it back to you, CERC friends.
Great. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Gemma. We appreciate you. Just quick reminders, here are our Talk Tuesday dates. If you know somebody that would like to register, the registration link is in here. Again, please do not share the link. Please share the registration link. And just keep in touch if you have any questions, feedback, thoughts for us. Here is all of our contact information. We thank you for being here. Enjoy your day. Thank you again, everyone.